Welcome to BBC News. My name's Mike Embley. Our top stories this hour. Ukraine and Russian-backed rebels complete one of the biggest prisoner exchanges since the conflict began. In Syria, the first evacuations begin from a rebel-held suburb near Damascus, but there's no relief for hundreds more trapped in Ghouta. An Arctic cold snap brings heavy snow to large parts of the northeastern United States and Canada. In the UK, snow and ice bring widespread disruption to travel on the roads and in the air. And military tactics and training to protect Chad's elephant population against ivory poachers. We have a special report. The government in Ukraine and rebels backed by Russia have completed one of the biggest prisoner exchanges since the conflict began nearly 4 years ago. Fighting started in eastern Ukraine soon after Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula. The United Nations says more than 10,000 people have died in the conflict. The BBC's Andrew Plant has the story.
In the war-torn east of Ukraine, carried on 3 plane buses, hundreds of prisoners are heading home, some after years in captivity. More than 300 people in one of the biggest prisoner swaps since the Ukrainian conflict began, the first such swap since September last year, arriving with their belongings, shivering in temperatures close to freezing, but glad to be finally free.
I'm very happy that I'm going back to Ukraine, and I thank everyone for the work that has been done to be able to see my loved ones again.
I want to believe that people are tired of all of this and must find the strength to engage in a dialogue, because without dialogue we will be in a deadlock with no way out.
The prisoner transports arrived in the early hours in the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine at the Mayorsk checkpoint near the city of Horlivka. It happened watched by tight security, the Ukrainian armed forces on one side and on the other the Russian-backed Eastern Militia. The conflict began 3 years ago, soon after Russia annexed Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula in March 2014. The UN estimates more than 10,000 have since died, the latest on Wednesday, a soldier, the first death since a Christmas ceasefire started last Saturday. The prisoners released on Wednesday then, a late president for families and loved ones who have spent many months campaigning to have them set free. But this exchange has been far smaller than many had hoped for, and hundreds more prisoners are still being held by both sides. ABC News.
I spoke just now to global affairs analyst Michael Bosicue, former spokesperson for the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which has a special monitoring mission to Ukraine. I asked him just how significant this prisoner swap is.
It's a very positive development in otherwise a very bleak situation. Let's not forget that this is a conflict that has been going on for almost 4 years. It's one of the longest running conflicts in Europe since the Second World War. And even though the Christmas ceasefire, which your correspondent referred to, did not hold even a few hours, the exchange did at least show that the two can make their guns fall silent for long enough for this swap to happen. Now, there are others remaining behind both lines that still need to be traded. And also, this is a very important component of the Minsk agreements that prisoners are swapped. But so the most important thing, of course, at the end of the day, is that a permanent ceasefire takes hold.
Very significant too, I guess, this decision by the Trump administration to provide lethal weapons to Ukraine clearly deepens American this conflict, may strain relations with Russia. Is it a game changer?
I don't think it's a game changer yet. Let's not forget that the amount of weapons are limited, that a lot of training will have to happen before these weapons are actually used, especially the anti-tank weapons. But one can see from the Russian reaction that they're taking this very seriously. The administration and also the Trump administration for this. But at least I think it will give the Ukrainians enhanced capability to secure positions, to not let the Russian-backed separatists take any more ground. And one more quick thing, of course, is that we have to remember that all of this, the swap, the rhetoric coming from Russia, it's happening in the context of upcoming presidential elections in Russia. And I think that President Putin needs to show himself, because he doesn't have much show, as a strong man to his own people, that he's willing to fight and gain more territory for Russia.
Michael, there has been a lot of bloodshed, of course, in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, certainly in recent days. I don't think that Christmas ceasefire lasted very long at all. Are we in a situation where almost any movement on anything is good news?
Absolutely. The death toll is well over 10,000 now. Several million displaced, including inside of Ukraine. And the toll on civilians has been very, very bad. In a busy Christmas season right now, a lot of people do cross that long contact line to visit friends and relatives to collect pensions. So that movement is very, very important. But I should mention one more thing. All indications is that the rebels are ratcheting up, are re-weaponizing for more conflict. In fact, aerial surveillance has detected, believe it or not, a aerial military school that the rebels can activate at any time. So that indicates, to me at least, that they are willing to use new ways to shell the Ukrainians, including from the air, possibly.
Michael Bosicki just recently returned from Ukraine, formerly with the OSCE. An improvised explosive device has gone off in a supermarket in the Russian city of St. Petersburg. Local officials say 10 people are in hospital, one in a serious condition. The incident is being investigated as attempted murder. No theories, though, have been ruled out. The BBC's Tim Allman reports.
Emergency services were quickly on the scene. The explosion taking place at around 6 local time. A small homemade device detonating, according to local media, in a locker where shoppers leave their belongings. Packed with pieces of metal equivalent to around 200 grams of TNT, it could have caused carnage. One woman's face was covered in blood, said this eyewitness, and one man was limping. From outside the supermarket, the damage looked fairly limited. Some broken glass and shattered windows. There have been injuries but no deaths, and now the authorities are on the hunt for the bomber or bombers. So far this hasn't been described as a terror attack, but nothing is being ruled out.
An investigation is underway, which includes experienced officers from the Federal Security Service and the Interior Ministry. All possible theories of what happened are being worked on.
Russia, and St. Petersburg itself, is no stranger to bomb attacks like this. In April, 16 people died when the city's metro system was targeted. And next summer, St. Petersburg is due to host games in the Football World Cup. So an incident like this will have the authorities on edge. Russia is a target, and whoever carried out this latest attack is still at large. Tim Allman, BBC News.
In Syria, aid workers have started to move critically ill children from a rebel-held suburb near the capital, Damascus. After months of negotiation, 4 patients were taken out of Ghouta on Tuesday night. Another 25 are expected to be moved in the coming days, though hundreds are in urgent need of treatment. Around 400,000 people have been under siege by government forces since 2013. From Beirut, our correspondent Martin Patience.
7-year-old NJ is preparing for a short journey, and it will almost certainly end up saving her life. She's suffering from haemophilia, but last night she was among 4 critically ill patients to be evacuated to Damascus for life-saving treatment. This is what she's leaving behind. Eastern Ghouta is one of the last remaining rebel strongholds fighting the government of Bashar al-Assad. It's been bombed and besieged for 4 years, with fighting intensifying in recent weeks.
I think it's a combination of everybody's efforts that at this really low time in Syria, there is a ray of light. And it's the children who are missing growing up in Syria. We must sort them out to give Syria a chance of a prosperous and peaceful future.
But food is hard to come by. Malnutrition is now widespread. Human rights groups accuse the Syrian government of trying to starve the rebels into submission. This evacuation may have the appearances of a humanitarian gesture, but that's simply not the case. We've been told by 2 sources that the Syrian government only agreed to it as part of a prisoner exchange. The main rebel faction in Eastern Ghouta agreed to free 29 Syrian government hostages, and in return, the same number of critically ill patients are being allowed to receive urgent medical care. But the United Nations says hundreds of others need to be evacuated. Among them, 3-month-old Karim, who was injured by government shelling. He lost his left eye. His mother was killed. Despite a prominent social media campaign, he's not being allowed to leave Eastern Ghouta.
Karim is injured. He's going to lose his sight. Here in the Ghouta, he can't get treated. The doctor wants to perform an operation so that he doesn't lose the sight in his eye.
For some, there is no hope, but for most, help is not coming anytime soon. Martin Patience, BBC News, Beirut.
Let's quickly round up some more of the main news for you. Culture Minister has resigned as controversy rages on over the decision by the current president to free former President Alberto Fujimori from jail. It's not clear why Salvador del Solar, a former actor and director, left his post, but he had been under pressure from artists and opposition leaders to stand up for human rights. Another day of protests in the Moroccan city of Jarada after the deaths of 2 brothers in a disused coal mine. The mine had been closed for years, but protesters say many young people have no option but to carry on working below ground. They're demanding action against unemployment and rising living costs. An Arctic cold snap is bringing sub-zero temperatures and heavy snow to large parts of the northeastern United States and Canada. Temperatures are being reported as low as -15 in Toronto. The U.S. lakeside city of Erie in Pennsylvania had a record 1.5 meters of snow in just 48 hours, and there is more on the way. Laura Podesta from CBS News reports.
Residents of Oswego, New York started digging out after 3 feet of snow fell overnight, forcing officials to declare a state of emergency. The snow continued throughout the day Wednesday.
I've not seen this. I've lived here my whole life and I've not seen it for a couple of years here. We've really gotten hit this year.
Lake effect snow broke records in Erie, Pennsylvania. 5 feet fell over the past few days. For much of the Northeast and Midwest, snow has given way to the bitter cold. In Minneapolis, single-digit temperatures froze Minnehaha Falls. A bridge in Green Bay became partially stuck because of the cold. And this is what's called pancake ice on the river Grand Haven, Michigan.
Here in New York's Times Square, people are bundled up, but the cold won't keep tourists who traveled for the ball drop from being right here on New Year's Eve.
How many layers will you wear to watch the ball drop?
To watch the ball drop, right now I have about 2 pairs of socks, a pair of nylons, a pair of jeans. So the ball drop, I guess, is 2 pairs of pants, 2 pairs of socks, maybe a pair of thermals.
Preparations are underway to make sure the ball drop goes smoothly. Waterford Crystal says the ball is built to withstand extreme weather. Laura Podesta, CBS News, New York.
BBC weather presenter Ben Rich explained for us why this particular snowstorm has been so severe.
North America is used to cold winters, but they rarely bite quite as hard as this. Temperatures are well below average, and some places, particularly on the eastern shores of the Great Lakes, have seen huge amounts of snow, courtesy of something we call lake effect snow. It happens when cold winds from the Arctic blow across the slightly less cold waters of the Great Lakes. That cold, moist air rises, it forms clouds which are then blown into the eastern shores of the Great Lakes, and that moisture in the cloud is released not as rain but as huge amounts of snow. And over the next few days, well, we can expect more of this because the cold air that is sitting in place is not going anywhere fast, and the winds will still be blowing down across the Great Lakes, picking up that moist and slightly warmer air and delivering it in the form of snowfall across the eastern shores. Perhaps not in the huge amounts over the last few days, but any further snow across this part of the world will not be welcome.
Ben Rich for us there. Snow and ice have also been causing disruption in many parts of the UK, with thousands of homes without power and dangerous conditions on the roads. The runway at Stansted Airport, north of London, was closed twice on Wednesday and a number of flights cancelled. Our Midlands correspondent Phil Mackey reports from Warwickshire.
The motorway at a standstill. It's all way, but throw in 5 centimetres of snow and you've got chaos. On the A14, things were even worse. This lorry span out of control, leaving drivers stranded.
Good morning. It's just gone past 10 o'clock in the morning. As you can see, we're stationary here on the A14, not going anywhere. I've been here for 5 hours and so have these.
My name's Tara. I'm on the A14 trying to go eastbound to Northampton. Set off from my house in Hinckley at 6 a.m. this morning. I've been on the A14 for 3 hours now. As you can see, there's nothing going in the other direction. A bit cross. I'm Canadian, so I'm used to this kind of weather. I know you guys aren't.
In the end, they were stuck for 7 hours before the road was cleared. And it wasn't just the roads. Stansted Airport had to close twice to clear snow from the runway. Birmingham Airport had to do the same for a short while too. And the weather kept ground crews big planes needed to be constantly de-iced. A swathe of central and southern England was worst affected, from Gloucestershire to Warwickshire to the Chilterns. And it didn't just lead to hazardous driving conditions, but thousands of homes lost power too.
Obviously the snow came in, it settles on our overhead conductor, and then with the cold wind chill as well coming in, that then freezes it into ice, and then therefore that takes the conductors down. And likewise does the same with tree branches, which would normally not be near the line but have taken our conductors down.
As the snow started to melt, there was a new danger. Flood warnings followed the thaw as streams became swollen and rivers started to rise. That meant more hazards to negotiate, and not everyone made it.
It's really been a difficult day here in Warwickshire. They've had flooding, snow, and to get around you really needed a specialist vehicle.
And tonight there's another warning as temperatures have fallen. The snow and slush has begun to freeze. Phil Mackey, BBC News, Warwickshire.
Stay with us on BBC News if you can. Much more to come, including this, the Harry and Barry Show. The former president talks to the British Royal about the irresponsible use of social media. Very glad to have you with us on BBC News. The latest headlines this hour. The Ukrainian government and rebels backed by Russia have carried out one of the biggest prisoner exchanges since the conflict began nearly 4 years ago. Syrian volunteers have evacuated the first group of critically ill children from a rebel-held suburb near Damascus. Now, how do you stop poachers devastating wildlife in remote parts of the African continent? One solution, though some people are very uncomfortable with it, is military-style training and tactics now being used in the vulnerable state of Chad. Zakouma National Park has lost 90% of its elephants in the past 40 years. At one point, there were fewer than 500 left. The BBC's Alistair Leithhead travelled to the park to find the elephant population finally recovering and tourists helping fund conservation.
They were the herd heading for extinction, but the elephants of Zakouma National Park have made a dramatic recovery.
Before, there used to be elephant carcasses everywhere.
So what's the difference been since African Parks took over?
Since African Parks arrived here, we no longer see carcasses of elephants in the park.
Across the continent, a private, not-for-profit conservation group called African Parks believes it has the answer to saving Africa's disappearing wildlife, and it's controversial. They are arming rangers, giving them military-style training. In some places, it's become a war against poachers. Adoum Alam is a sniper with fast response unit Mamba No. His father was killed by poachers in this park. He jumped at the chance to join up. It's a very dangerous job, but I love doing it, he said. It's a good income, but it's also personal. This was Zakouma 10 years ago. Decades of poaching killed 90% of the park's elephants, and many rangers as well. But today, it's a much healthier picture. They haven't lost an elephant in 2 years, or a ranger since 2012. And last year, the population started to grow again.
There were more than 20,000 elephants in this park just 40 years ago. Now there are just over 500. What's encouraging, though, is that they've now got babies. They're reproducing. Their numbers are starting to go up. And if the poachers can be kept at bay, the population's going to recover.
This is the best way to counter raids from the heavily armed Sudanese horsemen, the main perpetrators who've been poaching ivory here for centuries. But now both sides have automatic weapons. And local communities are a key to success. Schools are being built. Kids are learning about conservation. Villagers now often tip off the rangers if poachers are seen by.
African parks take on delegated management of protected areas in Africa. Normally, where public sector has failed, African parks will step in and with donor funding will then manage protected areas.
But eventually it should pay for itself. Zakuma's now attracting high-end adventure tourists who cover a third of the park's budget. Other marginal reserves in Africa will never make money. Animals have to be more alive than dead, not just to rich Westerners, but to local people as well. Alistair Leithhead, BBC News, Zakuma National Park in Chad.
A coach carrying Chinese tourists has crashed in Iceland, leaving one dead, several injured. The bus collided with a car on a main road around 250 kilometers east of the capital, Reykjavik, before sliding off the road and overturning. The occupants of the car, tourists from Lithuania, escaped unhurt. One Chinese national died at the scene. 12 others have been taken to hospital by helicopter. Former President Barack Obama has been talking to Britain's Prince Harry about the irresponsible use of social media. In an interview for the BBC, Mr. Obama said social media is distorting people's understanding of complex issues. He did not mention Donald Trump by name, but he suggested people in positions of leadership should exercise care when posting. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell has the story.
Prince Harry, first of all, you are very welcome to our studio.
Good morning.
Joining the Today programme for the day had been a big learning curve, Harry said, but he'd enjoyed being the interviewer rather than the interviewed.
It was quite fun, especially interviewing President Obama.
His principal scoop had been to persuade Barack Obama to give his first interview since standing down as US president. The word Trump was never mentioned, but may have been in Mr. Obama's mind when he warned about the use of social media.
And leadership have to find ways in which we can recreate a common space on the internet. One of the dangers of the internet is that people can have entirely different realities. They can be just cocooned in information that reinforces their current biases.
Harry had also interviewed his father. The main focus had been on climate change, the issue Prince Charles has championed for decades and for which he was sometimes derided.
Maybe now, some years later, they're beginning to realise that what I was trying to say may not have been quite as dotty as they thought. But, I mean, the issue really that has to go on being focused on, big time, I think, is this one around the whole issue of climate change, which, you know, now, whether we like it or not, is the biggest threat multiplier we face.
And then at the end of the programme, it was time to face questions rather than to ask them. First, about his fiancée, Meghan Markle, and her first Christmas at Sandringham.
She really enjoyed it. The family loved having her there. And you know, it's, yeah, there's always that family part of Christmas was always that work element as well. And I think, you know, together we had an amazing time. We had, you know, great fun staying with my brother and sister-in-law.
Harry's commitment to issues he cares about, like the armed forces and mental health, had come through strongly. So how does he see his future?
Part of my role and part of my job is to shine a spotlight on issues that need that spotlight, whether it's people, whether it's causes, whether it's issues, whatever it is. So I will continue to play my part in society and do my job to the best of my ability, so that I can wake up in the morning and feel energised, and go to bed, hopefully knowing that I've done the best that I can.
Not so long ago, Harry admitted to having doubts about a royal role. Clearly, no longer. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News.
More on that and much more on the news anytime on the BBC website. And you can get in touch with me and most of the team on Twitter. I'm at BBC Mike Embley. Thanks for watching.